They made a hospital owner sit on a cold metal bench like she was nobody. The CEO smiled, checked his watch, and told her to wait. 2 hours. No water, no chair inside, just silence and fluorescent hum like a corridor holding its breath before impact. Here's the problem: he didn't leave a nurse waiting. He left the person who could end his career. This isn't a fairy tale. It's the kind of quiet humiliation you've lived through at work when someone with a title decides your time, your exhaustion, your dignity don't count. But this woman is a former Army medic trained to watch, document, and strike only when the mission is certain. Stay to the end, and you'll see how real power gets exposed in daylight. Like the video and comment where you're watching from. The cold bench and the CEO's watch were only the final frames of a longer operation. It started with a different kind of silence, the kind that settles in your chest when a name you trust shows up on your phone, and the voice on the other end sounds wrong. Alyssa Reed lived in Austin and worked trauma nights at a county hospital that never slept. The emergency department smelled like antiseptic and burned coffee, and the fluorescent lights made everything look sharper than it felt. She moved through it with quiet precision, the way she had learned to move years earlier in an Army uniform when the stakes were measured in blood loss and seconds. When alarms screamed and a resident's hands shook, Alyssa's voice stayed level. Stay with me, breathe. Focus on the next right step. Her hands did not hesitate. Lines went in, pressure held, orders confirmed. She did not perform calm, she carried it like a tool. Her coworkers respected her without needing to know her history. They only knew results. Patients stabilized. Families heard the truth without sugar. New nurses felt steadier after watching her work. Alyssa never raised her voice, but people listened anyway. On Sunday, she called her father. Dr. Thomas Reed answered from San Antonio, usually seated in a lamplight corner of his home office. His face looked thinner in recent months, his hands less steady when he lifted his mug, but his eyes were still sharp and kind. "You eating real food?" he asked, every time as if it could keep her safe. "I ate," Alyssa said. "It counts." "That's not an answer," he replied. And then he smiled in a way that made her feel 13 again, sitting in the hospital cafeteria while he drank bad coffee and told her stories about the first year he kept Lone Star Meridian alive with sheer stubbornness. Her father had built Lone Star Meridian Medical Center out of a near collapse and turned it into a regional hub for civilians, veterans, and active duty families. He fought for grants, trauma designation, training programs. He fought so patients could be treated like people instead of numbers. He never talked about it like a legacy. He talked about it like a promise. Alyssa had never been part of his public life. No gala photos, no speeches where he introduced his daughter. It had bothered her when she was younger. Then it puzzled her, then it made sense. One night she finally asked him, "Why did you keep me hidden?" she said, trying to sound casual. He did not joke it away. Because the minute they know whose daughter you are, they stop seeing you. They see a shortcut, a shadow. I wanted your respect to be yours. Alyssa felt heat prick behind her eyes. "You're allowed to be proud." "I am," he said softly. "Just not at your expense." They talked about small things after that. A patient he missed, a meal she promised to eat, a piece of music he pretended not to like. When the call ended, Alyssa sat in the quiet a moment longer, as if holding the connection could hold him too. The call came on a Tuesday, mid-shift, while Alyssa was verifying medication orders at the nurse's station. She almost ignored it. The caller ID read Lone Star Meridian Administrative Office. Her stomach tightened before she answered. She stepped into a supply closet and shut the door. The shelves were stacked with gauze and saline. Ordinary items, comforting in their predictability. "Ms. Reed," a woman's voice said carefully professional. "This is Maribel Grant from Lone Star Meridian. I'm calling about your father." Alyssa pressed her shoulder against the doorframe. "Is he okay?" There was a pause, small but fatal. "I'm so sorry," Maribel said. "Dr. Reed passed away this morning. Cardiac arrest." It was quick. He did not suffer. The closet seemed to tilt. Alyssa slid down the wall until she hit the floor phone, pinned to her ear, one hand over her mouth, as if she could keep her world from spilling out. Maribel kept speaking words about arrangements and support, but they arrived muffled, distant, unreal. When the call ended, Alyssa stayed on the floor until her pager vibrated again. She wiped her face, stood, and went back to work. She placed IVs. She held pressure. She spoke gently to a frightened mother. Competence became armor because she did not know what else to wear. That night at home, the armor finally cracked. Alyssa sat on her kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, and cried until her ribs hurt. The grief was not poetic. It was physical. It made her feel hollow and heavy at the same time. San Antonio received her like heat and memory. The funeral drew people from every corner of Lone Star Meridian's orbit. Nurses arrived in scrubs, faces drawn from overnight shifts. Physicians stood stiff in dark suits. Veterans sat in quiet rows, hands clasped, eyes forward the way they had been trained to hold themselves when something mattered. Administrators whispered about transition plans as if the building might fall over if they stopped talking. Alyssa greeted strangers who told her what her father had done for them. He fought for a treatment approval. He called a family personally. He stayed late for a patient nobody wanted to claim. Each story hit her like a second loss. She kept her face steady because the room required it, but her hands trembled when she was alone. After the service, Alyssa drove to Lone Star Meridian and sat across from the main entrance with both hands on the steering wheel, as if she needed permission to go inside. The lobby was bright and polished marble floors reflecting ceiling lights, a fountain murmuring beside a wall of donor plaques. Her father's portrait hung above the reception desk, the familiar half-smile captured in a way that made her ache. Beneath it were words about vision and service, and a timeline of achievements written in corporate language that felt too clean to match the man she knew. A receptionist glanced up and lowered her voice. "Dr. Reed's family," she said. "I'm sorry. He was good to us." Alyssa nodded throat tight. Farther down the hall, two administrators passed with quick steps and tight smiles, speaking in the language of contracts and optics. Alyssa caught fragments and watched the way they avoided the portrait, the way grief did not slow them down. She walked back into the heat, feeling the building's weight and the uneasy sense that someone had already started treating her father's promise like a commodity. 5 days after the funeral, Alyssa sat in a law office that smelled like old leather and paper. The chair beneath her was expensive and uncomfortable. Across the table, an elderly attorney named Philip Hart unfolded a document with the calm of a man who had spent his life translating grief into assets and signatures. "Ms. Reed," he said, "you are the sole beneficiary of Dr. Thomas Reed's estate." Alyssa nodded numb. Philip continued, "You inherit Lone Star Meridian Medical Center in full, controlling ownership of the corporation, including facilities land operating agreements." Alyssa stared at him. Her brain rejected the sentence on instinct. "I'm sorry," she said. "The hospital." "Yes," Philip replied. A short laugh escaped her sharp with disbelief. "I'm a nurse. I'm not a CEO. I can barely keep my schedule straight." At the far end of the table sat Eleanor Briggs, the chair of the board. Eleanor looked like she had walked through storms and never let the wind show. Iron gray hair cut, neat posture, straight eyes clear and unsentimental. "It isn't a mistake," Eleanor said. "Thomas made this decision deliberately." Alyssa's voice cracked. "Why would he do that to me?" Eleanor did not soften. "Because he trusted you, and because he was worried." Philip slid documents toward Alyssa. She read words that turned a hospital into property responsibility liability power. Her pulse thudded behind her eyes. The meeting concluded with polite handshakes and promises to schedule transition briefings. Alyssa nodded like a woman watching her own life from across a room. As people began to leave, Eleanor rose and approached her. "Come with me," Eleanor said. They moved into a smaller office. Eleanor closed the door. The quiet that followed felt more honest than any condolence. Eleanor opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The papers inside were worn edges bent from being handled too many times. "I did not want to bring this out in front of everyone," Eleanor said. "But you need to see what has been happening while Thomas was sick." She spread documents across the desk. Complaint letters, incident summaries, audit highlights, exit interview notes. Alyssa's eyes skimmed, then slowed as the words turned into faces in her mind. Waited in the emergency department for hours with chest pain. No updates, no wound dressings, told to improvise. Nurses afraid to speak, staff threatened. Alyssa's fingers tightened on the paper until it crinkled. "How bad?" she asked. Eleanor met her gaze. Complaints increased by more than 300% year over year. Turnover is the worst we have ever recorded. Experienced nurses and physicians are leaving. Some cite safety concerns. Some cite retaliation. Alyssa felt her stomach drop. Retaliation. Write-ups, Eleanor said. Sudden schedule changes. Quiet terminations. People disappear and the paperwork says performance issues. Alyssa turned a page and found the audit notes. Large purchases flagged as irregular. Vendor contracts priced above market. Inventory values that did not align with receipts. "This is theft," Alyssa said, voice low. Eleanor did not say the word, but she did not correct her. "Something is very wrong." Alyssa walked to the window and stared at the street below. People moved through the day as if hospitals were safe by default, as if the system could not be turned against them. She could feel her father's absence like a hand pressed to her spine. "Who's running operations?" she asked without turning. Eleanor's answer was immediate. Grant Halstead. The name landed with a cold weight. Alyssa had seen Grant once years ago smiling for a local news segment, shaking hands in the lobby. He looked like a man who knew how to sell a story. "Thomas hired him 3 years ago," Eleanor continued. "When Thomas's health declined, he delegated more. Grant took control of day-to-day operations. He's charismatic. He presents numbers that look clean. He has friends in the right places." Alyssa returned to the desk and flipped through more letters. The pattern was clear. Delays, missing supplies, fear, silence. Systems failing in ways that harmed patients and trapped staff. Alyssa's voice steadied. "Why didn't the board stop him?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Because he kept the surface polished. Because people wanted to believe this was temporary. Because Thomas was dying and no one wanted to add a war to his final months." Alyssa felt anger rise, then settle into something harder. "I need to see this for myself." Eleanor nodded. "As owner, you can request department meetings, a tour, a full financial review." Alyssa shook her head. "Not as owner." Eleanor studied her. "Explain." "If I show up as leadership, they will stage a performance," Alyssa said. "They'll stock the shelves for 1 day. They'll assign their best staff to walk with me. They'll smile and tell me what they think I want to hear. I'll learn nothing." Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "So what do you want?" Alyssa's answer came with the calm of a soldier reading a map. "I want the hospital when it thinks it is alone." Eleanor's expression shifted, understanding and concern crossing at the same time. "That is dangerous." Alyssa's mouth tightened slightly. "I've worked under fire. This is different, but it isn't unfamiliar." Eleanor watched her for a long moment, then asked, "Thomas kept your identity private. Grant has never met you, has he?" "No," Alyssa said. "My father made sure of it." "Then you could move through the building unseen," Eleanor said, as if testing the idea out loud. Alyssa placed her palm on the folder. The paper felt like a stack of voices that had been ignored too long. "I'll go in as a travel nurse. Night shift, temporary assignment. My credentials are real. My name will be different." Eleanor's shoulders rose with tension. Alyssa met her gaze. "Only you, Caleb Winslow, and my attorney will know the truth. No one else. Not staff, not security, not physicians. The fewer people carrying the secret, the safer it stays." Eleanor's voice lowered. "Grant Halstead has people loyal to him. "I won't give them a target," Alyssa said. "I won't confront him privately. I won't argue in hallways. I document, I observe, I listen." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "And if he moves against you?" Alyssa's face did not change. "Then he proves what he is." Eleanor did not like that answer, but she recognized it. The kind of resolve that cannot be negotiated. She nodded once, the motion small but final. Alyssa left the office and stepped into the San Antonio heat-breathing air that felt too thick to fill her lungs. She sat in her car for a long minute with both hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine, letting herself feel what she was about to do. Grief still lived in her body. It did not fade. It shifted shape. That night in a hotel room with thin walls and an air conditioner that never quite quieted, Alyssa opened her laptop and began the work the way she had learned to begin any mission. Gather facts, build a cover, control variables. She applied through a legitimate travel nursing agency using the name Alyssa Rain. She uploaded her license verification and certifications. She listed her trauma experience in plain language. She did not embellish. She did not explain the Army. The system did not need her story, only her qualifications. The response came fast. "Alyssa." Rain, the recruiter, said on the phone, voice bright with relief. "Lone Star Meridian needs coverage immediately. Night shift. Can you start this week?" Alyssa looked at her calendar. Her father had been gone less than 2 weeks. The timing felt brutal, but brutality was not a reason to stop. "Yes," Alyssa said. The recruiter exhaled. "Perfect. They'll send onboarding forms. You report to HR for badge and scrubs. Shift starts at 7. After she hung up, Alyssa stared at the folder on the hotel desk. The same folder she would later carry down sterile halls. The same folder that would later become bait for a man who thought paperwork was power. She called Eleanor. "They hired me," Alyssa said. Eleanor's voice was tight. "They did not ask questions." "They need bodies," Alyssa replied. "Be careful," Eleanor said. "If this is as bad as it looks, you will feel it fast." Alyssa ended the call and read every onboarding document line by line. She saved copies to secure storage, then printed the essentials and slid them into her folder. She slept in short blocks, waking twice to check her phone as if the building itself could reach through the screen. On her first morning at Lone Star Meridian, Alyssa walked into HR wearing plain clothes and a controlled expression. The office was windowless. The air smelled like toner and stale coffee. A woman behind a desk typed without looking up. "Alyssa Rain," the woman said, voice flat. "Yes," Alyssa replied. A thick handbook slid across the desk. "Sign these tabs. Badge downstairs with security. Night shift starts at 7. Don't be late. No welcome. No orientation tour. No gratitude. Just processing." Alyssa signed, flipped through glossy mission statements that read like marketing, then walked downstairs to the security office. A guard snapped her photo and printed a badge. "Alyssa Rain." She clipped it to her shirt and felt the weight of the lie settle against her chest. In the locker room, she changed into dark blue scrubs, identical to everyone else's. She pulled her hair back tighter. She looked into the small mirror inside the locker door and saw a woman who could disappear inside a system that already treated people like furniture. Alyssa took one slow breath and stepped into the corridor where monitors beeped behind closed doors, where the air carried antiseptic, and where the night shift waited like a locked room with the lights on. Alyssa took one slow breath and stepped into the corridor where monitors beeped behind closed doors, where the air carried antiseptic, and where the night shift waited like a locked room with the lights on. The first thing she noticed was sound. Not the alarms, not the carts rattling over tile, but the small, constant noise beneath everything. A building humming under strain. Ventilation pushing cold air through vents. The faint clack of shoes that never stopped. Voices that kept dropping when someone walked by. Her badge caught the light as she passed the nurse's station. Alyssa Rain, RN. It felt like a borrowed uniform. She had worn many kinds of uniforms in her life, Some stitched with a name, some without one at all, and she knew the difference between camouflage and concealment. Camouflage hid you in plain sight. Concealment hid you from everyone, including the people you needed. Tonight, she needed to be plain sight. A charge nurse with a tight bun and tired eyes looked up from the assignment board. She scanned Alyssa like inventory, not like a person. "You're the traveler," she said. "Yes." The charge nurse tapped a clipboard with a pen. "I'm Tessa. You'll float between med-surg and overflow. We're short. Everyone's short. You can handle 4 patients, maybe 5 if it gets ugly." Alyssa kept her voice steady. "Show me the layout." Tessa's gaze flicked past her shoulder as if checking who might be listening. Then she pointed with her chin. "Supply room is there. Med room is there. Pixis is in the med room. Bathroom is there. Break room is there. If you need anything from management, don't." Alyssa let the words land without reacting. "Who do I report to if there's a safety issue?" Tessa's mouth tightened. "You report to me. If it's urgent, you handle it. If it's a problem, you let it go." Alyssa held her gaze. "That's not how it works where I come from." Tessa gave a humorless half-smile. "Then welcome to Lone Star Meridian." The nurse's station was crowded, but not with people moving with purpose. It was crowded with people moving with exhaustion. 2 nurses argued over a missing chart. Someone swore under their breath while staring at a computer that refused to load. A unit secretary held a phone to her ear and said, "I understand," in a voice that sounded like she had said it 1,000 times without believing it once. Alyssa stepped aside to put her bag in a locker. The locker room smelled like sweat and cheap deodorant. The fluorescent light above the mirrors was too bright and too honest. An older nurse was already there, sitting on a bench, lacing shoes with slow hands. Her face carried the kind of fatigue that settled in the bone. "You're new," the woman said without looking up. Alyssa nodded. "Alyssa." The woman finally looked at her. Her eyes were sharp but guarded. "Denise Parker," she said. "Traveler." "Yes." Denise's gaze dropped to Alyssa's badge and rose back to her face like she was measuring the distance between who Alyssa claimed to be and who she actually was. "Listen," Denise said quietly. "Do your job. Don't be a hero. Don't be curious. Curiosity gets you chewed up here." Alyssa's voice stayed calm. "Why?" Denise's hands paused on her laces. "Because you're replaceable. That's how they treat you. Like a body with a license. The minute you start acting like a conscience, you become a problem." Alyssa felt a familiar heat in her chest, the kind that came when the rules were written by people who would never pay the cost. Denise finished tying her shoes and stood. "I'm not trying to scare you," she said. "I'm trying to keep you alive." They walked out together. Alyssa's first patient was an overflow bed, wedged into a space that looked designed for equipment, not a human being. A man in his 60s lay on a stretcher with an oxygen cannula taped to his face. His skin was gray around the mouth, eyes shiny with sweat. "Pain is 8 out of 10, he said, voice thin. "They told me the medication was coming." Alyssa glanced at the chart. Order time stamped 2 hours earlier. It was a familiar story dressed in a new uniform. She checked the medication record, not administered. "Okay," she said, keeping her voice gentle. "I'm going to take care of it." He laughed once the sound cracked. "They all say that." Alyssa moved toward the med room. The hallway was long with institutional art bolted to the walls. A framed print of a desert sunrise. A quote about resilience. Someone had taped a motivational poster beneath it that read, "Excellence is our mission." The tape was peeling. The medroom door was locked. Alyssa tried her badge. Denied. She tried again. Denied. A nurse walked by with a cup of ice. "Hey," Alyssa said. "Who has the key access for this room?" The nurse shrugged without slowing. "Tammy, she's on break." Alyssa kept her tone polite. "Where's Tammy?" The nurse didn't look back. Break room. Alyssa walked to the break room. The break room door was open. Inside, a microwave hummed. Someone's food smelled burned. A television mounted on the wall played a news segment with the sound off. Tammy sat at a table staring at her phone legs stretched out like she owned the room. Her badge dangled from her waistband like a trophy. "Tammy," Alyssa said. Tammy looked up slowly. Her eyes were flat. "What?" "I need medroom access. A patient has been waiting." Tammy's gaze drifted back to her phone. "I'm on break." Alyssa's jaw tightened once, then released. "I understand. I'll walk with you and bring you back here after. It takes 2 minutes." Tammy's eyes narrowed. "You knew?" "Yes." Tammy leaned back. "That's why you still think you get to ask for things." Alyssa felt her pulse speed not from anger alone, but from a cold assessment of risk. In the Army, a medic learned quickly when a situation was about medicine and when it was about power. This was power. Alyssa lowered her voice, not pleading, just steady. "He's in pain. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for access to do the job." Tammy stared at her a beat too long. Then she stood with theatrical slowness and followed Alyssa down the hall. She scanned her badge, opened the door, and stepped aside. "You get 2 minutes," Tammy said. Alyssa pulled the medication, checked the dose, checked the name, checked the timestamp, then moved fast. She did not hurry like she was flustered. She moved like she had done this in worse places under worse light. When she returned to the patient, his hands were clenched against the stretcher rails. "You came back," he said, surprised. Alyssa administered the medication. "I said I would." His eyes closed, relief inching into his face like sunrise. "Thank you," he whispered. Alyssa's chest tightened. It should never have been a surprise that someone kept their word. She went back to the nurse's station. The shift had barely started, and already she could feel the building's rhythm. Delays that were not accidents. Indifference that was practiced. Near midnight, an overhead page called for a rapid response in a room down the hall. Alyssa moved without waiting for permission, reflexes from a different life kicking in. She found Dr. Priya Shah already in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back tight, eyes focused and unblinking. "Airway," Dr. Shah said, voice clipped. "Suction." Alyssa looked for a suction kit. The cart was half-stocked. The drawer that should have held what they needed was empty. "Where is it?" Alyssa asked. A nurse beside her shook her head quickly, eyes wide. "I don't know." Alyssa felt the moment stretch. Seconds turning into danger. "Improvised suction," Dr. Shah snapped. "Now." Alyssa ripped open what she could find, assembled a workaround with the speed of someone who had once built a sterile field in a dust storm. She handed it over. Dr. Shah did not look up, but she nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement of competence. The patient stabilized. The team exhaled. The room loosened like a fist unclenching. In the hallway afterward, Dr. Shah wiped her hands and finally looked at Alyssa. "You're the traveler," she said. "Yes." Dr. Shah's eyes narrowed, assessing. "You move like you've seen real chaos." Alyssa kept her face neutral. "Trauma nursing." Dr. Shah glanced down the hall, then lowered her voice. "Good. Don't waste it." Alyssa waited. Dr. Shah spoke again, quieter. "They keep the metrics clean. They keep the story clean. That's all that matters here." Alyssa held her gaze. Patients almost died because the cart wasn't stocked. Dr. Shah's mouth tightened. "You think I don't know that?" Alyssa watched her walk away, coat flaring behind her like a flag. The exchange left a residue in Alyssa's mind. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. Dr. Shah was not naive. She was contained. At 2 a.m, Alyssa was in a patient room with an elderly woman who trembled beneath thin blankets. The woman's eyes darted to the door every few seconds. "Are they going to do the procedure tonight?" the woman asked, voice shaking. Alyssa sat on the edge of the chair and spoke softly. "They're going to do it in the morning. You're safe. I'll explain what to expect." The woman's fingers gripped Alyssa's hand with surprising strength. "I hate being here," she whispered. "No one tells you anything. You feel like you're disappearing." Alyssa swallowed. "I see you," she said, meaning it. A figure appeared in the doorway. A supervisor in a gray blazer over Scrub's arms, crossed, expression sharp. Her badge read, "Carla Mendez, Night Supervisor." "Nurse Rain Carla," said. Alyssa stood yes. Carla's eyes flicked to the patient, then back to Alyssa with disapproval. "You're behind." Alyssa kept her tone respectful. "She's scared. I was explaining the procedure." Carla stepped forward. "We have protocols. You do not sit and chat. You move. You document. You clear the room." Alyssa's jaw tightened. She needed reassurance. Carla's voice dropped colder. "Are you questioning me?" Alyssa felt the moment as if it had edges. A wrong word here could turn into paperwork later. Paperwork could turn into a termination. Termination could end the mission before it began. Alyssa forced her voice even. "No, ma'am." Carla held her gaze until Alyssa looked away first. "Good," Carla said, "because plenty of nurses can do your job. Don't make me regret staffing you." Carla left. The patient's hand loosened from Alyssa's. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. Alyssa's throat tightened. "No," she said softly. "You didn't." She wanted to say more. She wanted to tell the woman she deserved better. She wanted to tell her this was not normal, not acceptable, not permanent. But she felt the camera in the corner of the hallway, the eyes in the system, the way the building punished honesty. Alyssa squeezed the woman's hand once and stepped out. At 3:30, she finally had a moment to breathe. She walked into the break room and found it empty. She sat at the far end of a table, head tilted back against the wall. She closed her eyes, listening. Footsteps approached. Voices followed low and tense. 2 nurses entered, talking without noticing her in the dim corner. "Did you hear about Jonas?" one asked. The other let out a short, bitter laugh. "Who hasn't?" "They fired him." For what the second nurse asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. The first nurse lowered her voice. "He told someone on the board that supplies were missing, said patients were at risk." The second nurse's laugh died. "Idiot." The first nurse bristled. "He was trying to do the right thing. And now he's unemployed," the second nurse said, voice flat. "They called it performance issues." The first nurse swallowed. "He was one of the best. Everyone knows why they did it." Silence. Then the second nurse whispered, "That's why nobody talks." Alyssa stayed perfectly still, breathing, slow, eyes closed. She let the words sink in. She felt her hands curl into fists under the table nails biting her palm. In the army, silence often meant discipline. In this building, silence meant fear. When the nurses left, Alyssa opened her eyes and stared at the stained linoleum. The break room clock read 3:47. She could hear the distant beep of monitors, the squeak of a cartwheel, the muted cough of a patient behind a door. She stood and returned to the floor. By sunrise, Alyssa had confirmed what the complaint letters had suggested, but confirmation did not soften the impact. It sharpened it. The systems were not merely strained. They were deliberately neglected. Basic access depended on who felt like cooperating. Supplies were absent where they were most needed. Compassion was treated like a productivity defect. At 7, the hallway changed. Day shift began to trickle in faces, pressure scrubs, crisp. The energy shifted from survival to performance. Alyssa stood at the nurse's station charting when a security guard opened the main staff entrance door and held it like a doorman at a luxury hotel. A black sedan rolled into the reserved spot closest to the doors. The parking sign had a brass plate, Chief Executive Officer. Alyssa watched through the glass as a man stepped out. Grant Halstead moved with rehearsed confidence. Suit, flawless hair, perfect shoes polished like mirrors. He adjusted his cufflinks before walking as if the world should wait until he looked ready. The security guard said something with a polite smile. Grant did not answer. He walked past without a glance as if the guard were a fixture. The guard's smile faltered for half a second, then returned trained and forced. Alyssa's stomach tightened. This was not just arrogance. This was a system of dominance reinforced daily, taught through small humiliations. An hour later, a message went out over the unit phones. Mandatory staff meeting. Cafeteria. Attendance required. Alyssa went because refusing would draw the wrong attention. The cafeteria was packed with scrubs and lab coats, tired eyes, and tense shoulders. A large screen had been set up behind a podium. A tray of pastries sat on a table near the front, mostly untouched. People stood in clusters, speaking in murmurs that stopped when someone in business attire walked by. Grant Halstead stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted. Not from respect, from reflex. "Good morning," Grant said, voice smooth, friendly in a way that never reached his eyes. "I'll keep this brief. I know everyone is busy." He clicked a remote. Colorful charts appeared on the screen. Lines going up. Bars labeled efficiency. "I'm pleased to report that our efficiency is up," Grant said. "Costs are down. We are running a tighter ship." Alyssa scanned the room. She saw subtle exchanges glances shared between nurses who had spent the night improvising because supplies were missing. She saw a respiratory therapist's jaw clench. She saw Dr. Shaw, near the back arms, crossed expression, unreadable. Grant's tone sharpened slightly. "Some of you may feel we are asking you to do more with less. That is called growth. That is called adapting to the modern healthcare landscape." He smiled, a controlled curve of the mouth. "If you cannot keep up with these expectations, perhaps this is not the right fit for you." The words landed heavy. No one protested. No one laughed. The silence was thick with understanding. Grant continued talking about streamlining accountability optics. He spoke the language of corporate war. He used terms like performance and output and margin. Alyssa heard none of the words that mattered at the bedside. When the meeting ended, the room released. People moved quickly toward the exits as if leaving a danger zone. Alyssa gathered her things, keeping her face neutral, her body calm. Grant stepped down from the podium and walked through the crowd like a man inspecting troops. He stopped when he reached Alyssa. His eyes dropped to her badge. "Alyssa Rain," he read aloud. Alyssa kept her voice steady. "Yes, sir?" Grant's smile widened, but it stayed cold. "Traveler." "Yes." "Welcome to Lone Star Meridian," he said. "Work hard. Follow the rules. We'll get along fine." Then he walked away. Alyssa stood still for a beat, feeling the chill he left behind. It was not fear that touched her skin. It was the certainty that a man like this never tolerated uncertainty, and she was uncertainty walking around in scrubs. Outside the cafeteria, Denise Parker appeared at Alyssa's shoulder. "Be careful," Denise said quietly. Alyssa looked at her. "He always like that." Denise's eyes flicked around, checking who might be close enough to hear. "He has ears everywhere. People report. People trade information for protection." Alyssa nodded, letting it settle. "And if someone doesn't play along..." Denise's mouth tightened. "Then they're gone." Alyssa walked back toward the unit and felt the building shift around her. She could see the hierarchy in the posture of the staff, the way shoulders lifted when administrators passed, the way voices dropped. She could see the fear like a fog that lived at knee level, invisible until you learned where to look. That afternoon, after she clocked out, Alyssa sat in her car in the staff lot. The sun was bright and indifferent. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, but she did not start the engine. She replayed the night in her mind with the discipline of a medic reviewing a scene after the patient was stable. The locked med room. The missing suction kit. The supervisor's threat. The nurse fired for speaking up. Patterns. Patterns were how you found the source. Back at her hotel, Alyssa showered and let the water run longer than necessary, not for comfort, but for noise. She stood under the stream and stared at the tile, thinking about what she had access to and what she did not. A traveler's badge got her on the floor. It did not get her into decision-making. It did not get her into purchasing. It did not get her into the pharmacy vault. But buildings always leaked information. Systems always left footprints. That evening, Alyssa returned for her second night. The same fluorescent hum, the same strained sound beneath everything. Different faces. Same exhaustion. Near 10, a transport aide pushed a gurney down the hall and stopped beside the nurse's station. A young man lay on it, eyes, glassy lips cracked. "Where's he going?" Alyssa asked. The aide shrugged. "Nowhere, no beds." Alyssa glanced at the board. Overflow again. Hallway medicine sold as efficiency. A call light flashed from a room at the end of the hall. Alyssa entered and found a woman with a fresh surgical dressing grimacing and gripping the bed rail. "Pain meds," the woman said. "Please." Alyssa checked the record. Ordered, not given. She walked to the med room and felt her pulse spike before she even tried the door. Locked. This time, Tammy was not in the break room. Tammy was nowhere. Alyssa asked 3 nurses. One shook her head. Another said she had not seen her. A third looked at Alyssa like she was foolish for asking. Alyssa went to Tessa, the charge nurse. "Tessa," Alyssa said. "Med room is locked. I have 2 patients waiting." Tessa's eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back. "Key access is supposed to be shared," she said, voice tight. "It isn't." Alyssa held her gaze. "So what do we do?" Tessa's lips flattened. "We wait, or we borrow from another unit if they have it." Alyssa stared at her. "That's not safe." Tessa's voice dropped. "I know." Alyssa felt something hot rise behind her ribs. She pressed it down. Anger could be useful if it was controlled. Uncontrolled anger got you noticed. Noticed got you removed. "Who decided this?" Alyssa asked softer. Tessa hesitated. "Management did. They said too many discrepancies, too much loss, so now access is restricted." Alyssa heard the lie underneath the logic. Restricting access did not prevent loss. It prevented care. It created plausible deniability. We could not give the medication because we could not get it. Alyssa looked down the hall at the call lights blinking like distress signals. "Find me access," she said quietly. Tessa's eyes widened slightly at Alyssa's tone. Not rude, not loud. Command without rank. Tessa swallowed and picked up the unit phone. Alyssa returned to her patient, sat for a moment, and spoke softly. "I'm working on it," she said. "I'm not leaving you." The woman's eyes searched hers. "Please." Alyssa nodded. "I know." 20 minutes later, Tessa arrived with a staff member from another unit and a set of keys that jingled like a confession. Alyssa administered the medication. The woman exhaled and tears slid from the corners of her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Alyssa squeezed her hand once and left the room, feeling the system's cruelty in her teeth. After midnight, Dr. Shaw called for supplies again. Alyssa followed her to the supply room, a narrow space with shelves that should have been full. Instead, there were gaps, empty hooks, dust outlines where boxes used to sit. Dr. Shaw's eyes went cold. "We're out of sterile packs," Alyssa said, scanning. Dr. Shaw let out a breath that sounded like restraint. "Of course we are." Denise appeared in the doorway as if drawn by the same instinct. "Orders show delivered," Denise said, voice flat. "We just never see them." Dr. Shaw looked at Alyssa. "You want to know what it feels like," she said quietly. "It feels like someone is taking from your hands while you're trying to keep someone alive." Alyssa met her gaze. "Who signs for deliveries?" Denise's eyes flicked to the camera in the hall, then back. "Receiving," she said. "Materials management. But it gets messy. People sign for things that never hit the shelf." Alyssa stored the words. At 2, Carla Mendez appeared again, sweeping through the hall with a clipboard like a weapon. She stopped at Alyssa's charting station. "Nurse Rain," she said. Alyssa looked up. Yes. Carla tapped the clipboard. "Your documentation is slow." Alyssa kept her voice calm. "I'm thorough." Carla leaned closer. "Thorough is not the goal. Efficiency is." Alyssa's fingers paused on the keyboard. "Patients are waiting for medication because the med room is locked." Carla's eyes narrowed. "That is not your concern." Alyssa held her gaze. "It becomes my concern when it harms them." Carla's voice dropped. "You want to keep your contract here. You focus on your job. You do not diagnose the system." Alyssa felt the threat land like a weight. Understood, Alyssa said. Carla straightened satisfied and walked away. Denise watched from a few feet away. When Carla was gone, Denise came closer. You can't talk like that, Denise whispered. Alyssa's voice was quiet. I didn't raise my voice. That's not what I mean, Denise said, frustration and fear twisting together. You can't push back. Not here. Alyssa looked at Denise. How long have you accepted this? Denise's eyes flashed. Since they made it clear that speaking costs you everything. Alyssa nodded once. And it never got better. Denise swallowed hard. No. The words hung between them like smoke. Near the end of the shift, Alyssa went into the break room again. This time, she did not sit. She stood near the vending machine and listened to the building. She heard laughter from a room down the hall where administrators were finishing coffee. She heard a patient's call bell repeated, unanswered. She heard a nurse say, "We don't have it," and then apologize as if she had personally emptied the shelves. Alyssa returned to her hotel at dawn and wrote notes on paper, not on a phone. She wrote times, names, doors that were locked, supplies that were missing, patients in hallways. She kept it clinical, not emotional, because emotion blurred details. Details were what held up under pressure. On her third night, the pattern tightened. A pharmacy tech passed Alyssa in the hall with a bin of medications and eyes that refused contact. A materials management worker rolled a cart past an empty supply shelf and did not look up. The unit moved like a place that had learned to live around injury. A patient's family cornered Alyssa near the nurse's station. "My mother's been asking for her nausea meds for an hour," a man said, voice strained. "No one tells us anything." Alyssa kept her tone calm. "I'm going to check right now." The man's face softened with disbelief. "You're the first person who said that like you meant it." Alyssa checked the record. Ordered, not administered, again. The medication was in the system. The access was the problem. The staffing was the problem. The culture was the problem. Alyssa walked to the med room and found it unlocked for once. She retrieved the medication and administered it. The patient's shoulders relaxed. The family's eyes filled with gratitude that should have been unnecessary. When Alyssa left the room, Carla Mendez was waiting. "You're spending too much time with families," Carla said. Alyssa's face stayed neutral. They needed information. Carla's voice was sharp. "They need treatment. Conversation does not bill." Alyssa felt the line between medicine and commerce stretch until it almost snapped. Carla leaned closer. "Do not make me write you up." Alyssa held Carla's gaze without blinking. "Understood." Carla walked away satisfied again, as if she had corrected a defective piece of equipment. At 3:30, Alyssa found herself back in the break room, not to rest, but to listen. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the flicker of the silent television. A half-eaten pastry sat abandoned on a paper plate. Someone had taken a bite and never returned. Ray Delgado, the security guard, appeared in the doorway a moment later. He stepped in, stopped when he saw Alyssa, then relaxed slightly. "You're still here," he said. Alyssa nodded, catching up on charting. Ray's eyes flicked toward the hall. He lowered his voice. "I told you before," he said. "They don't like questions." Alyssa met his gaze. "People are getting hurt." Ray swallowed conflict in his face. "I know." Alyssa kept her voice soft. "Why stay?" Ray looked away. "Because my kid needs insurance," he said. "Because I used to think this place mattered. Because leaving feels like letting it win." Alyssa watched him for a beat. "Have you seen anything that doesn't make sense?" Ray's jaw tightened. He hesitated, then spoke. Sometimes he said quietly, "Late, after midnight, boxes moved through the admin wing, not toward the units, toward the parking lot." Alyssa did not react outwardly. She felt her pulse jump anyway. "Who?" Ray's eyes darted to the hallway again. "I'm not saying names," he whispered. "Not yet." Alyssa nodded once. "Fair." Ray exhaled like he had been holding his breath. "Just watch yourself," he said. "You move different. People notice different." Alyssa's voice stayed calm. "I'm trying not to be noticed." Ray looked at her badge. "Doesn't matter." he said softly. "This place notices anyone who still cares." He left, and Alyssa stood alone in the break room with the vending machine's cold light reflecting off her badge. When the shift ended, Alyssa walked out into early morning heat and felt the city waking. The hospital behind her stayed the same, a machine that ran on silence and fatigue. She sat in her car and looked up at the building's glass facade. From a distance, it looked clean, modern, impressive. From inside, it felt like a place that had been hollowed out. She drove to her hotel and did not sleep right away. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up the employee portal she had been shown during onboarding. Policies, schedules, announcements, a section labeled Resources. Alyssa clicked through slowly. She was not looking for secrets. She was looking for seams, for places where the system leaked. Her eyes stopped on a page titled Purchasing and Materials Request. It was written in bland language. It included a link to a shared directory for supply order forms and vendor contact lists. It was not protected beyond a basic employee login. Alyssa stared at the link, then at her notebook filled with times and names and empty shelves. Her phone buzzed. A text from the travel agency reminding her to confirm her hours. Alyssa ignored it. She clicked the link and watched a new page load, the kind that looked harmless until you understood what it could reveal. The page loaded with the kind of plain design that made people underestimate it. Beige columns, a hospital logo in the corner, a drop-down list of departments, and a directory labeled Vendor Relations. It looked like nothing. It felt like a door left ajar. Alyssa scrolled slowly, letting the air conditioner hiss fill the room. She read the way she read a map in low light, not staring at the obvious roads, but searching for side paths that led to the same destination. Purchase request forms. Delivery acknowledgement templates. Materials receiving procedures. A spreadsheet titled Approved Vendors. She clicked it. Names of companies filled the screen. Some familiar. Some generic. Some that sounded patriotic on purpose. Patriot Meridian Supply sat near the top, flagged as a primary vendor for multiple departments. Trauma, ER, surgical services, pharmacy-related supplies. Alyssa leaned closer. The vendor code was used everywhere. If the hospital spent money, Patriot Meridian Supply was somewhere in the chain. She opened the purchasing archive. The system asked for a basic password prompt that every employee used to access HR documents. No extra authentication, no warning about confidentiality. The hospital treated its own financial skeleton like an afterthought. The records were arranged by month. Alyssa chose the most recent quarter and began clicking. Order number, department, item description, quantity, unit price, total, authorizing signature. She read each line until her eyes stopped skimming and started calculating. Sterile trauma packs. $10 at her Austin hospital. Here, $14.50. IV, start kits. Normal price. Here marked up. Simple gauze, a few cents. Here, nearly double. At first, it could have been explained away as convenience fees rush shipping regional pricing differences. Alyssa had worked enough budgets to know costs fluctuated. She could be patient with math, but the pattern was too clean. Not random, not chaotic, a controlled bleed. She pulled up a blank document and started writing numbers by hand, then typing them into a spreadsheet. She labeled columns with dates and departments. She moved through months like a medic moving through a casualty list, confirming names, confirming wounds, confirming what the system tried to blur. In 18 months, Lone Star Meridian had spent millions on supplies. The purchases were frequent, large, and consistent. The kind of spending that should have turned supply rooms into stocked fortresses. Alyssa thought of the empty hooks, the dust outlines on shelves, Dr. Shaw building a workaround because a basic kit was missing, a patient in pain because the medroom was locked. The spending did not match the reality. The money had gone somewhere else. She sat back and pressed her fingers to her temples. She did not allow herself to jump to conclusions. In the field, jumping got you killed. You had to confirm. You had to cross-check. Alyssa pulled up the inventory ledger. The page took longer to load. It was older, clunkier. The kind of software hospitals kept because replacing it required accountability. She searched by department. Trauma, MedSurg, ER. The reported value of supplies on hand was listed in neat totals that made the hospital look stable. Alyssa picked one category: sterile trauma packs. She compared the reported inventory to the purchase totals. The numbers were not just off. They were wrong in a way that could not be explained by waste, by misplacement, by normal loss. Alyssa whispered to the empty room number. She moved to the next category, then the next. The gap widened. She pulled out her notebook and wrote a date, the time, and the page name. Then she wrote a second timestamp when she saved screenshots into an encrypted folder on her laptop. She did not trust the hospital network. She did not trust any device that could be accessed by IT. She saved everything twice. One copy on her laptop. One copy on a small drive she kept in her bag, wrapped in a clean gauze pad out of habit. At 3 in the afternoon, the hotel room phone rang. Alyssa did not answer. She watched it ring, then stop, then ring again. A travel agency number flashed. She muted it and kept working. When she needed more than the employee portal could provide, she went outside. San Antonio's heat hit like a hand to the face. She walked into a small county records office where the air smelled like paper and old carpet. People sat in plastic chairs waiting for property documents, divorce filings, permits. Nobody looked up when she approached the counter. A clerk slid a form toward her without emotion. Company name, the clerk said. Alyssa wrote Patriot Meridian Supply. The clerk typed, then turned the screen slightly. You can view the filings on that station. Print is 25 cents a page. Alyssa sat at the public computer and opened the filing. The owners were listed. The registered agent, the address. Her eyes stopped. Darren Halstead. Alyssa sat very still. The letters on the screen did not move. Her heartbeat did. Halstead was not a common name in San Antonio. It was not a coincidence. It was a connection hidden in plain sight, protected by the assumption that nobody would look. Alyssa clicked through more pages. Darren Halstead had registered the company less than 2 years earlier. That meant the vendor appeared after Grant Halstead took control of operations. The timing fit like a lock turning. She printed the filings. She did not fold them. She placed them flat in a folder and slid the folder into her bag as if it were a weapon that needed to stay ready. Back in her hotel room, Alyssa pulled up competitor pricing from other medical suppliers. Some were national vendors. Some were regional. The average pricing differences were obvious. Patriot Meridian was charging 30 to 40% more than competitors for the same items, and the hospital was approving it without question. Alyssa did the math again this time with a calculator, not trusting her own fatigue. The overcharge alone accounted for a chunk of the missing money, but not all of it. That meant the theft was not only in pricing, it was in volume, in phantom deliveries, in items billed and never received. Her phone buzzed. A message from Denise Parker. "You working tonight?" Alyssa stared at the text. Denise had never reached out outside the hospital. That alone was information. Alyssa typed back, "Yes." Another buzz. "Be careful. Supervisor asking about you." Alyssa let the words sit. She did not reply with reassurance. She replied with the truth. "I will." At dusk, she returned to Lone Star Meridian. The building was different at night. Less polished, more honest. The lobby lights reflected off the marble and made the place look like a shrine to itself. Alyssa walked past the fountain and the donor plaques and felt the weight of her father's portrait above reception. She kept moving. The night shift greeted her with the same strained energy. No one asked about her day. No one asked why she looked more focused than usual. People here had learned not to ask questions that could make them responsible for answers. In the med-surg corridor, Carla Mendez stood with her clipboard, eyes scanning like she was hunting defects. Alyssa nodded respectfully and walked past without slowing. Carla's gaze followed her, then moved on. Alyssa spent the first half of the night doing the job. Meds, assessments, documentation. She did not give anyone a reason to accuse her of negligence. If the system wanted to break her cover, it would look for weakness. She gave it none. At 1 in the morning, Dr. Shaw appeared at the nurse's station with a chart in her hand and tension in her shoulders. "I need oncology meds," Dr. Shaw said, "for a consult patient. Pain uncontrolled." Alyssa checked the record. The medication was ordered. The quantity was listed. The pharmacy had confirmed a receipt earlier in the day. Alyssa opened the unit medication cabinet. The slot was empty. She looked at Dr. Shaw. "It's not here." Dr. Shaw's eyes went flat with anger that had been repeated too many times to be dramatic. "Of course it isn't." Alyssa walked to the pharmacy window. The tech behind the glass looked up with a tired expression that hardened when she recognized Alyssa's badge. "We don't have it," the tech said before Alyssa could speak. Alyssa kept her voice calm. "The system shows receipt. This is a controlled medication. Where did it go?" The tech's eyes flicked to a camera mounted above the window, then to the hallway, then back to Alyssa. "I said we don't have it," the tech repeated a fraction sharper. Alyssa lowered her voice. "I'm not trying to get you in trouble." The tech's jaw tightened. "Then stop asking me questions that do." Alyssa held her gaze. "Who signs disposal?" The tech's expression changed. A flicker of fear crossed it. "Nobody disposes without documentation," the tech said too fast. Alyssa waited. The tech swallowed. "CEO has override access," she said, barely audible. "That's all I'm saying." Alyssa nodded as if she had received a routine piece of information. She thanked the tech, then walked away with her stomach twisting. Dr. Shaw followed her to the corner of the hallway where the sound of the unit softened. Dr. Shaw spoke without looking at her. "You're not from here," she said. Alyssa kept her expression neutral. "No." Dr. Shaw's voice was low. "Then you still believe someone will fix it if you say the right words." Alyssa looked at her. "I believe patients should not suffer because someone wants a margin." Dr. Shaw's mouth tightened. "Careful. That sentence has gotten people fired." Alyssa nodded. "I've heard." Dr. Shaw studied her for a moment, then leaned closer. "If you're going to push, do it smart." Alyssa did not ask what Dr. Shaw meant. The hallway had ears. Later, at 2:30, Alyssa caught Denise in an empty charting alcove. Denise's hands were shaking slightly as she clicked through a medication screen. "Denise," Alyssa said quietly, "I need to ask you something." Denise's eyes widened. "No." Alyssa kept her tone gentle. "I'm not asking you to accuse anyone. I'm asking you about what you have seen." Denise stared at the computer screen as if it could protect her. "I've seen plenty," she said. "I keep my mouth shut." Alyssa nodded. "I saw the purchasing logs." Denise looked at her sharply. "You shouldn't be in those." "They are not protected," Alyssa said. "That should tell you something." Denise's breath caught. "What did you see?" Alyssa spoke softly, like someone delivering a report. "Patriot Meridian Supply. Prices inflated. Orders frequent. Inventory missing." Denise's eyes hardened with a bitter sort of recognition. "That name is everywhere." Alyssa leaned in slightly. "Do you know who owns it?" Denise shook her head quickly. "Doesn't matter." "It does," Alyssa said. Denise's voice broke with frustration. "Fine," she whispered. "Rumor says it's family. That's what people say. That's why it never changes." Alyssa watched Denise's face. "Has anyone tried to report it?" Denise's eyes flashed. "Yes." Alyssa waited. Denise swallowed. "A nurse named Mateo. 2 months ago. He went to someone he thought was safe. Next week he was written up 3 times, then terminated." Alyssa kept her voice steady. "For what?" Denise let out a short laugh that sounded like pain. "For being late once, for missing a documentation checkbox for insubordination. They built a file on him in days." Alyssa felt cold move through her chest. "Who built the file?" Denise did not answer, but her silence was an answer. Alyssa nodded once. "Did Mateo keep anything? Any records?" Denise looked at her with alarm. "Stop." Alyssa's voice softened. Denise, people are being hurt. Denise's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I know, she whispered. I know. That's why I'm still here. So at least someone who cares is still standing at the bedside. Alyssa felt her throat tighten. She did not touch Denise. She did not offer comfort that could be seen. She stepped back. Thank you, Alyssa said. Denise shook her head, angry at the world. Don't thank me, she whispered. Fix it. Alyssa returned to the floor. She worked until near dawn, then stayed after her shift ended. The hospital corridors quieted as day staff took over. Administrators began to appear hair done, clothes pressed, voices louder. The building changed masks. Alyssa moved toward the administrative wing with her badge visible and her posture relaxed. She walked like she belonged. She was careful not to hurry. In a place like this, urgency drew attention. Calm slid through cracks. A glass door led into a small office section labeled Materials Management. A worker behind a desk looked up. Can I help you? The man asked. Alyssa smiled lightly. I'm looking for delivery confirmation on a missing item. The unit is out and it's delaying care. I was told to check receiving. The man's expression shifted to annoyance, but he gestured toward a file cabinet. Sign in, he said. Then you can look, don't take anything. Alyssa signed in with her travel name and a unit number. She sat at a small table and opened the cabinet drawer. Delivery logs were arranged by date. Each form had a vendor name, an item list, and a signature line. Alyssa found Patriot Meridian Supply. She flipped through pages and saw signatures repeating. Not the same name, but the same style of pen stroke. Quick loops, consistent pressure. The kind of signature a person used when they were not reading, just approving. Alyssa copied the name into her notebook. She noted dates where deliveries were marked complete, even though the units had been empty that night. She looked for receiving stamps. Some were missing. She felt the hair on her arms rise. The system was not sloppy. It was intentionally messy, just enough to make accountability hard, not enough to make auditors stop the train. Alyssa photographed the forms with her phone, but she did not hold the phone up openly. She angled it inside the folder as if she were reading. Snap, 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 no flash, no sound. She moved slowly, patient, methodical. When she finished, she placed each paper back exactly as it had been. She realigned the edges. She closed the drawer. She signed out. Walking out of Materials Management, Alyssa passed a conference room where Grant Halstead stood with two men in suits. They were laughing about something. Grant's smile was wide. His posture was loose. He looked like a man who believed the building belonged to him. One of the men glanced toward Alyssa, then back to Grant, the way someone looked at staff, the way they looked at a wall. Grant's gaze flicked over Alyssa and moved on without recognition. She was invisible again, and invisibility was useful until the day it became dangerous. Alyssa left the building and drove straight to her hotel. She did not stop for coffee. She did not stop for food. Her hands were steady on the steering wheel, but her mind was moving fast. In her room, she spread the printed corporate filings on the desk and laid her notes beside them. She opened her laptop and started organizing everything into a timeline. She labeled each file with a date, time, and source. Employee portal screenshot. Public filing. Delivery log photograph. Inventory ledger. Missing medication record. Witness statement note. She did not write people's names in full. She used initials. She protected them the way she wished someone had protected them before. Her phone buzzed. A call from Eleanor Briggs. Alyssa stared at it for a moment. Her thumb hovered over decline. Then she answered. Eleanor's voice came through tight and controlled. How are you? I'm working, Alyssa said. There was a pause. Tell me what you have. Alyssa spoke quietly, but every word was precise. Primary vendor contract tied to CEO's family. Patriot Meridian Supply is owned by Darren Halstead. Pricing is inflated. Purchasing volume suggests full stock, but inventory levels are far lower. Delivery logs show confirmations without corresponding stock. Pharmacy staff report CEO override access for disposals. Controlled medications ordered and documented but unavailable at bedside. Eleanor did not speak for a long moment. When she did, her voice sounded like steel being drawn from a sheath. That is enough for law enforcement. It is enough to raise alarms, Alyssa said. It is not enough to protect the staff who will be blamed when alarms go off. Eleanor's breathing was audible. You're in danger. Alyssa looked at the folder on her desk. I am careful. Eleanor's voice sharpened. Careful is not the same as safe. Alyssa kept her tone calm. I am not careless. Eleanor exhaled. Caleb Winslow is ready. So is Dr. Mercer. We can call an emergency session. Alyssa's hand tightened around the phone. She imagined Grant Halstead smiling in a hallway the way he had smiled at the staff meeting. She imagined him watching a report come in, then watching his people start building files on anyone who might talk. Alyssa spoke slowly. If you move too early, he will turn it into a staff problem. He will offer a scapegoat. He will claim a few bad employees. He will bury the rest. Eleanor's voice dropped. So you want more. Alyssa did not hesitate. I want proof that holds under pressure. Proof that shows intent. Proof that shows retaliation. Eleanor said her name softly, like a warning, Alyssa. Alyssa kept her voice steady. I can keep documenting. I can keep gathering. But I need you to keep the board quiet until you can move as one. Eleanor was silent for a moment, then said, You are your father's daughter. Alyssa looked at the ceiling as if she could see through it to the hospital. I'm his nurse, she said. Eleanor's voice softened slightly. Do not do this alone. I'm not, Alyssa replied, and thought of Denise's trembling hands, Ray's conflicted eyes, Dr. Shaw's warning. The call ended. Alyssa sat at the desk and listened to the hotel air conditioner cycle on and off. She opened a new file and titled it Personnel Actions. She wrote Mateo's name from Denise's story, then stopped and crossed it out, replacing it with a letter and a number. She began documenting the pattern of write-ups. Who got disciplined? When? For what? She searched the employee bulletin board system for internal postings and policy updates. She found a memo about professionalism and attendance that had been sent recently, written in language that sounded like a weapon disguised as a guideline. Alyssa printed it. She taped it to the inside cover of her folder as a reminder that words were often used to cover violence. On her next night shift, she watched how people moved when Carla entered a room. Heads lowered, conversations stopped. The unit grew quieter. Fear had become a reflex. Alyssa's patient load was heavy. She managed it because that was the job, but she also watched. She watched for the hidden motions, the handoffs, the missing keys, the small moments where care was delayed by design. At 1:30, she saw a materials cart push down the hall toward the administrative wing instead of toward the units. Two men walked beside it, not in scrubs, not in clinical attire, wearing polo shirts with hospital logos. Alyssa stepped out of a doorway just enough to see the cart pass. Boxes stacked, neatly sealed, labeled. Patriot Meridian Supply. Her pulse jumped. She forced herself to remain still. She waited until the cart turned the corner, then she walked the opposite direction, choosing not to follow in a way that would be obvious. She found Ray Delgado near a side entrance, standing under a security camera with arms crossed. Ray's eyes met hers and he looked away quickly. Alyssa approached, as if she were passing through. Ray's voice was low. You saw that. Alyssa nodded once. Ray swallowed hard. They move things at night because the day staff asks questions. Alyssa kept her voice soft. Where does it go? Ray's jaw tightened. Admin wing, then the loading dock, then it disappears. Alyssa studied his face. Has anyone recorded it? Ray looked at the camera above them, then back at Alyssa. You think I can record anything in this place? He whispered. Alyssa did not push him. She nodded and walked away, letting the question live in his mind without forcing him to answer. Back at the nurse's station, Alyssa logged into the system again and checked pharmacy disposal reports. The data was harder to access, but not impossible. She searched by medication code, by date range, by sign-off authority. Grant Halstead's name appeared on multiple entries. Override authorization. Disposal approved. The quantities did not match the usage. Alyssa stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. In her Austin, hospital-controlled med discrepancies triggered immediate review. Here they were processed like routine paperwork. Alyssa opened a blank note on her phone and wrote down the report numbers, then transferred them into her secure file later. She did not print from hospital printers. She did not email herself. She left no trail that could be tracked easily. At 4 a.m, she entered a patient room where a young woman lay with an IV taped to her hand, eyes sunken with exhaustion. The chart indicated cancer history and pain management complications. The medication ordered was not available. The patient looked at Alyssa with raw honesty. "They keep telling me to wait," she whispered. "I don't know how much more waiting I have in me." Alyssa felt something tighten in her chest. She pulled a chair close and spoke softly. "I'm here," she said. "I'm going to stay with you while we figure this out." The patient's eyes filled with tears. "Are you new?" she asked. "Yes," Alyssa said, and the word tasted bitter. When Alyssa left the room, Carla was waiting in the hall, clipboard in hand, like it had been crafted for punishment. Carla's eyes flicked to Alyssa's badge. "You're spending too much time in that room," she said. Alyssa kept her voice even. "She's in pain. Her medication is unavailable." Carla's expression did not change. "Then document that you notified pharmacy and move on." Alyssa held her gaze. "That does not help her." Carla's voice dropped. "It helps you, and that should be your priority." Alyssa felt the urge to speak sharpen in her throat. She swallowed it. She nodded once. "Yes, ma'am," Alyssa said. Carla watched her a beat longer than necessary, then walked away. Alyssa returned to charting and wrote every step she took, every notification, every delay. She made the record a battlefield log, factual and clean, not emotional, not accusatory, unbreakable. When the shift ended, Alyssa walked out into morning light with her notebook heavier in her bag. She drove to her hotel and spread the new evidence across the desk. The case was no longer a suspicion. It had shape, it had names, it had numbers. It had a signature trail and controlled medication overrides, and a vendor connection that turned pricing into a personal pipeline. Alyssa placed a small drive beside the documents and copied everything onto it, then copied it again onto a second drive. She labeled neither. She wrapped each in gauze and tucked them into separate parts of her bag. She sat down, hands resting flat on the desk, and stared at the wall for a long moment, listening to the quiet that came when the hospital was out of reach. Then she opened her email and saw a new message waiting at the top of the inbox, stamped with the hospital's internal header, and a subject line that made her shoulders go still. The subject line sat at the top of her inbox like a thumb on the pulse. Board meeting participation. Alyssa read it once without blinking. Then again, slower, letting each word settle into its proper weight. The message was brief, professional, almost cheerful in tone. "You have been selected as the employee representative for the upcoming emergency board session. Please prepare brief remarks regarding staff morale and hospital culture. Your presence will help provide valuable perspective." Alyssa's shoulders stayed still, but her mind moved. The phrase, employee representative, was not an invitation. It was a tool. It meant someone had decided to place a friendly face in the room to wrap the hospital's problems in a carefully managed narrative. She closed the laptop and sat in the hotel chair, hands resting flat on her thighs. The air conditioner cycled on. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. Outside traffic hissed along the highway like distant surf. She pictured Grant Halstead's smile on the cafeteria stage and the way the room had gone quiet, not with respect, but with learned caution. He did not like unknown variables. He liked rooms where he controlled the angles, the lighting, the story. Alyssa picked up her phone and called Eleanor Briggs. Eleanor answered on the second ring. "Tell me." They selected me, Alyssa said. There was a pause. Alyssa could hear Eleanor's breathing, measured, contained. Selected you for what? Employee representative. Emergency board session. Remarks on morale and culture. Eleanor exhaled a single sharp breath. That is him. Alyssa's voice stayed calm. He thinks a traveler is safe. A temporary person. Someone who needs the contract. Eleanor's tone hardened. He wants a shield. He wants a witness, Alyssa said. On his side. Eleanor spoke the next words like a command. We call law enforcement now. Alyssa looked at the files spread across the desk. The corporate filings printed flat. The delivery logs photographed, the medication overrides recorded. Evidence of a pipeline. Evidence of intent. Evidence of harm. Not yet, Alyssa said. Eleanor's silence crackled through the phone. Alyssa. Alyssa's eyes stayed on her notebook. If you move now, he turns it into chaos. He offers a resignation. He blames a manager. He claims he will investigate. He buys time. Eleanor's voice tightened. Time costs patience. I know, Alyssa said. That is why the setting matters. He asked for this board session. He wants it. He wants witnesses. He wants it documented. If I speak there, the record becomes the weapon. Eleanor did not respond immediately. Alyssa could imagine her standing at a window staring at the city with the same kind of focus her father used when he was deciding whether to take a fight he could not afford to lose. Caleb Winslow's voice entered the call closer now, as if Eleanor had put the phone on speaker. Alyssa, this is Caleb. Are you saying you want to present evidence during the session? Yes, Alyssa replied. Caleb's tone remained controlled, but it sharpened at the edges. That exposes you. Alyssa's gaze flicked to her travel badge on the nightstand. Alyssa Rain, R.N. A small rectangle of plastic that had kept her invisible. He already sees me, she said. Not as a person, as a risk. If he chose me as the representative, it means he has noticed I'm not afraid to work. Eleanor's voice softened slightly. You have been speaking to staff. I have been listening, Alyssa said. That is enough to make him cautious. Caleb asked, do you have copies secured outside the hospital? Alyssa checked her desk. 2 small drives wrapped in gauze. 1 envelope addressed to an attorney in Austin, sealed and ready. Another to Caleb, not yet sent. I have duplicates, Alyssa said. 1 goes to you today. 1 goes to my lawyer. 1 stays off-site. Eleanor said, we can still call police. Alyssa held the phone tighter. If police arrive without board action, he frames it as a political attack. If the board acts first with evidence, law enforcement becomes the next step, not the first. Caleb exhaled slowly. You want the board to see it with their own eyes. I want them to feel the weight of it, Alyssa said. Not a summary, not a memo, the reality. Eleanor went quiet, then said, you will not do this without protection. Alyssa's voice stayed steady. You will be there. Caleb will be there. Dr. Mercer will be there. Security is your jurisdiction. You can arrange it. Eleanor's tone changed, shifting into logistics without listing a plan aloud. Stay in your cover. Keep your head down. Do not confront him alone. I won't, Alyssa said. After the call, Alyssa moved with a deliberate calm. She did not rush. She did not waste motion. She laid the evidence out like an after-action report. First, the vendor pipeline. Patriot Meridian Supply Filings ownership link to Darren Halstead. Comparative pricing item by item. The pattern of inflated costs. The timeline of when the vendor appeared. Second, the missing inventory. Purchase totals compared to on-hand value. Photographs of empty shelves taken discreetly from angles that showed timestamps on hallway clocks. Third, the receiving logs. Delivery confirmations without matching stock. Repeated signatures. Missing receiving stamps. Fourth, the controlled medications. Override approvals under Grant's name. Disposal quantities that did not align with usage. The patient impact documented through chart delays. Pharmacy denials, nurse notes written cleanly without accusations. Fifth retaliation. The memo about professionalism. The write-ups built in clusters. Denise's account of Mateo's termination recorded as an anonymous witness note, not a name. Alyssa built it into a single narrative not for drama, but for clarity. She knew how people heard information under stress. Too much at once became noise. You had to pace the pressure. She copied the files onto a new drive and verified them twice, then erased the working folder and rebuilt it from the secure copy. She printed only what needed printing. She marked each page with a date and time in pen, then photographed the page with her phone and saved the photo to encrypted storage. Redundancy was not paranoia. It was survival. When she finished, she walked into the bathroom and splashed water on her face. Her eyes looked older than they had a month ago. Grief had moved from an acute wound to a heavy presence. She stared at her reflection and did not look away. "You don't get to rush this," she said quietly, speaking to herself like she would speak to a nervous medic before a difficult procedure. "You get it right." That night at the hospital, Alyssa kept her posture relaxed and her expression neutral. She did not carry the folder openly. She kept it inside her bag, zipped, only opening it in private spaces. She did not speak to Denise unless necessary. She did not linger with Ray Delgado. She moved like she had learned to move in a place where attention could kill you. Carla Mendez watched her more closely now. Alyssa noticed it in small ways. Carla's eyes flicking to Alyssa's badge. Carla appearing at the end of a hallway when Alyssa was leaving a patient room. Carla's clipboard always angled as if ready. Near midnight, Carla stopped Alyssa at the nurse's station. "Nurse Rain," Carla said. Alyssa looked up. "Yes, ma'am." Carla tapped the clipboard. "Your patient charting shows multiple delays in medication administration." Alyssa kept her voice even. "Because medication access has been restricted and the pharmacy has been out of stock on ordered controlled meds." Carla's eyes narrowed. "Be careful with your wording." Alyssa paused, then adjusted with clinical precision. "Because medication availability has been limited." Carla's lips pressed together. "Better." Alyssa held Carla's gaze. "Would you like me to document it differently?" Carla leaned in slightly. "I would like you to focus on what you control, your performance." Alyssa nodded once, understood. Carla walked away as if she had won something. Denise appeared a moment later, moving like she belonged to the wall, not the room. She did not look directly at Alyssa. "HR's been asking about you, Denise," said voice low. Alyssa kept her face neutral. "What kind of asking?" Denise's jaw tightened. "Your attendance, your behavior, your attitude." Alyssa's stomach went cold. "My attitude." Denise swallowed. "They're building something." Alyssa nodded once. "Thank you." Denise's eyes flashed with frustration that had nowhere to go. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They don't need a reason. They just need paperwork." Alyssa lowered her voice. "Then we give them paperwork that works both ways." Denise stared at her, then looked away quickly as if even listening was dangerous. The next day, Alyssa received another email, a reminder, polite with a calendar attachment. The board session time, the requested topic, the expectation of professionalism. Alyssa printed it, folded it once, and placed it in her folder beside the evidence. She did not take the bait emotionally. She took it as a piece of the case. It confirmed that someone above the unit level was tracking her and trying to steer her. That evening, Alyssa returned to the hospital and felt the air change the moment she walked through the staff entrance. A certain tightness in the building, a ripple of attention that did not match her role. She passed the security desk and Ray Delgado's eyes met hers, then slid away. Alyssa kept walking. At the nurse's station, Tessa avoided eye contact. Denise kept her head down. Carla moved through the hall like she was inspecting for cracks. Alyssa worked her patient load and kept her notes clean. She documented delays without adjectives. She charted objective barriers. She wrote the truth in a way that made it difficult to twist later. At 2 in the morning, she went to the supply room for sterile dressings and found the shelf empty again. She stood in front of it for a moment, letting the absence feel real. A shelf was not an abstract problem. It was a missing barrier between a patient and infection. Her phone buzzed. A message from the travel agency. Lone Star Meridian requested you pick up extra hours. Alyssa stared at the text. The request did not come from the agency. It came from the hospital through the agency. Someone wanted her tired. Someone wanted her dulled. Alyssa typed back. Confirm details. The reply came quickly. Double shift approved. Start at 7. End at 7. Additional coverage due to call-out. Alyssa's fingers hovered over the screen. She could refuse. She could claim limits. She could protect her body. But refusal would be noted. And she could not afford to create a clean excuse for them to remove her before the board session. She typed one word. Confirmed. The night of the double shift began with a quiet cruelty. At 7, Alyssa clocked in and saw the schedule board. One nurse's name had been crossed out with a single thick line. Alyssa asked Tessa softly who had called out. Tessa's eyes flicked to Carla's office. She didn't call out Tessa, whispered. They sent her home. Alyssa felt the cold deepen in her chest. Who? Tessa did not answer, but her eyes said enough. By midnight, Alyssa had been moving for hours without pause. By 2, her legs ached with the dull burn of sustained strain. Her lower back throbbed. Her head felt too full, as if the hospital's fluorescent hum had nested behind her eyes. She did not slow down. She kept her hands steady. She kept her voice gentle with patience. She did not allow exhaustion to make her sloppy. In the field, fatigue got people killed. Here, fatigue got people blamed. At 2:45, Alyssa finally had a brief pocket of silence. The unit was stable. Call lights were down. Dr. Shaw was in the ER. Carla was not visible. Denise had vanished into charting. Alyssa walked toward the administrative wing not because she belonged there, but because it was quiet. The hallway outside it had a metal bench bolted to the wall. It was a place staff used when they needed to sit for just a minute and breathe. Alyssa sat down carefully. She set her bag beside her. Inside her folder was tucked under a notebook and her travel documents. The edge of the folder peeked out papers slightly visible. She noticed it and almost corrected it, then stopped herself. She let it remain. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She listened. She measured her breathing. She felt the weight of her own fatigue and used it like cover. The hallway was empty at first. The building's night sounds filled the space. Distant cartwheels. A door latch clicking. A monitor beeping somewhere far down a corridor. The faint whir of a camera motor adjusting its focus. Footsteps approached slow and deliberate, not the hurried step of clinical staff. Alyssa's body tensed, but her face stayed slack. Her breathing remained slow. The smell hit next. A sharp, expensive cologne that did not belong to scrubs or disinfectant. Through barely parted lashes, she saw polished shoes enter her field of view. Then a cuff of tailored fabric. Grant Halstead. He was not supposed to be here at this hour. No CEO worked at 2:47 in the morning unless he wanted something the day could not provide. Grant stopped beside the bench. He looked down at Alyssa's badge. Alyssa Rain, RN. Alyssa kept still. Grant's gaze moved to the bag, to the visible papers. He leaned slightly, reading what he could. Board session. Grant looked up, scanning the hallway. Alyssa could see the motion of his head, careful assessing. He was checking angles, checking cameras, checking whether the building was truly asleep. Alyssa held her breath for a half-second, then let it out slowly. Grant stepped closer. He looked down at Alyssa's face, watching for the twitch of an eyelid, the shift of a jaw. Alyssa did not give him one. Grant reached toward the bag. Alyssa felt her pulse slam against her ribs. Her hands curled inside her sleeves, nails pressing into her palm. Every training instinct screamed to grab his wrist, to twist, to pin him to the wall, and make him understand what it meant to touch another person's property. She did none of it. Grant slid the folder out smoothly, like a man who had done this before. He opened it and flipped through pages quickly, eyes scanning for useful ammunition. He pulled out his phone and angled it low, photographing the documents one by one. Alyssa watched through her lashes. A background check form, employment history, a contact list, a licensing page, notes on hospital culture, notes about staff morale. Not the evidence drives, not the core files, but enough for him to build a narrative. Grant's mouth tightened in concentration. He took another photo, and another. He was not stealing for curiosity. He was harvesting for control. Alyssa remained still, letting him believe his version of her was true. A tired traveler, a weak link, a person who could be discredited with a photograph. Grant paused and looked at her again. He leaned closer as if listening for the rhythm of her breathing. Alyssa made it smooth and slow, steady as a sleeping body. Grant nodded to himself, satisfied. He slid the folder back into the bag, adjusted it so it looked undisturbed, and stepped away. His shoes made almost no sound on the polished floor as he walked down the corridor toward the administrative wing. Alyssa waited until his footsteps disappeared fully, then another 10 seconds beyond that. Only then did she open her eyes. The hallway's fluorescent lights felt harsh. Her vision swam for a moment, not from fear, but from rage held too tightly. She sat up slowly and pulled the folder out. The papers were there. Not altered, not missing, but now touched, now compromised. She looked up at the corner of the hallway. A security camera sat mounted high lens pointed down the corridor. Grant had looked at cameras, but he had not looked long enough. He had assumed the angle did not capture this bench clearly. He had assumed the building belonged to him. Alyssa pulled out her phone and typed with fingers that were steady because she forced them to be. Eleanor. He accessed my folder. He photographed documents. Timestamp 2:47. Camera is positioned above the bench. The reply came almost immediately. Leave now. Alyssa stared at the words. Her chest rose and fell. She did not move. She typed back. No. Another reply, faster, sharper. Alyssa, leave. This is retaliation. He is escalating. Alyssa's jaw tightened. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly now, not from fear, but from the exhaustion and the strain of restraint. She typed carefully. I am safe. I am not confronting him alone. I am keeping the record intact. Eleanor replied. Do you have copies? Alyssa answered. Yes. Drives secured off-site. Folder is not critical evidence. Camera footage is. A long pause, then another message. I will handle the board security. Caleb is informed. Alyssa read it twice. The words did not soothe her, but they anchored her. She placed the folder back in her bag and zipped it fully. She stood and walked back toward the unit with a controlled pace. She did not run. She did not look over her shoulder. She did not let the building see that anything had happened. The rest of the shift passed in a strange blur. Patients needed meds. Families asked questions. Call lights blinked. Alyssa answered them all. The work did not pause for thriller moments. The hospital kept swallowing hours. At 6:45, Carla Mendez approached Alyssa at the nurse's station. Nurse Rain Carla said. Alyssa looked up. Yes, ma'am. Carla's eyes were too calm. You were seen resting in the administrative hallway last night. Alyssa held her gaze without flinching. I sat for a moment during a double shift. Carla's lips curved slightly. Not a smile. An edge. Resting can be interpreted as sleeping. Alyssa's voice stayed even. I was not asleep. Carla tapped her clipboard once. We'll see. Alyssa felt the threat and let it pass through her without reacting. Carla wanted emotion. Emotion made people messy. Messy made them easy to remove. Alyssa nodded once, understood. Carla walked away. Denise appeared at Alyssa's side after Carla left. Denise's eyes were wide with quiet alarm. "She's going to write you up," Denise whispered. Alyssa's tone stayed low. "Then she creates a record." Denise swallowed. "They will use it." Alyssa looked at her. "They already are." Denise's face tightened. "Why are you doing this?" Alyssa held Denise's gaze with a steadiness that did not ask Denise to carry the burden only to see it. "Because someone has to," Alyssa said. Denise looked away, jaw working as if she were biting down on years of swallowed words. Then she whispered, "He was in the building. I saw the sedan at night." Alyssa nodded. "I saw him too." Denise's eyes snapped back to Alyssa's face. "What?" Alyssa kept her voice calm. "He accessed my documents." Denise's hand rose to her mouth, horrified. "Jesus!" Alyssa lowered her voice further. "Do not repeat it, not here." Denise nodded quickly, fear and anger battling in her expression. "I won't." Alyssa clocked out and walked through the lobby. Morning staff were arriving, coffee in hand, voices louder. The building's daytime mask was sliding on. Grant Halstead's portrait was not on the wall, but his influence felt present in the way people moved, in the way conversations ended when administrators passed. Alyssa drove to her hotel and locked the door behind her. She stood in the middle of the room for a moment, letting her body feel the exhaustion it had been denying. Her legs shook. Her hands felt heavy. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the folder in her bag. He wanted a file on her. He wanted to paint her as unreliable. He wanted to poison her words before she spoke them. Alyssa opened her laptop and began writing a clean account of the incident. Timestamp. Location. Observations. No emotional language. No conclusions. Just facts. She saved it, encrypted it, and copied it to the drives. Then she called Caleb Winslow. Caleb answered quickly. "Alyssa." "He accessed my personal folder and photographed documents," Alyssa said. "The camera above the bench should have captured it." Caleb's voice tightened. "Do you have confirmation the camera angle covers it?" "I saw the lens position," Alyssa replied. He assumed it did not. Caleb's tone shifted into controlled focus. "Do not request footage yourself." "I won't," Alyssa said. "I will have Eleanor authorize it," Caleb replied. "Chain of custody matters." Alyssa nodded, even though he could not see it. "Understood." Caleb paused. "Are you still safe?" Alyssa looked at her reflection in the dark hotel window. A woman in a plain shirt hair pulled back eyes, steady and tired. "Yes," she said. "And I am still invisible enough to move." Caleb exhaled. "Keep it that way." Alyssa ended the call and opened the folder labeled Board Session Remarks. She did not write inspirational lines. She did not write broad accusations. She wrote the truth as a sequence of documented facts. She practiced speaking it out loud once then again, refining the pace, removing any words that sounded like emotion instead of evidence. She had learned in the military that the most devastating statements were the ones delivered without heat. Heat invited argument. Facts forced response. She stood in the bathroom looking at herself in the mirror and rehearsed one more time, voice low and steady. When she finished, she turned off the light and stood in the dark for a moment listening to her own breathing. She sent one final message to Eleanor. "I will arrive early. I will stay in cover. Evidence drives are secured." Eleanor replied, "We will be ready." Alyssa placed the drives in separate pockets of her bag, wrapped protected. She set the folder beside them. She placed her travel badge on the nightstand like a discarded skin. Then she lay down fully clothed on top of the bedspread, not to sleep deeply, but to rest her body in a way that kept her mind alert. The hotel room remained quiet, except for the steady hum of the air conditioner. Alyssa stared at the ceiling until her eyes finally closed, and even then her hand stayed curled lightly around the strap of her bag, as if the mission could not be set down without consequence. Alyssa did not wake to an alarm. She woke the way she used to in tents and field hospitals, eyes opening before the world asked. The hotel room was still dark, the air conditioner cycling with a steady mechanical breath. Her hand was still curled around the strap of her bag. She sat up slowly, listening. No footsteps in the hallway. No knock at the door. Nothing urgent except the weight of time. In the bathroom mirror, she looked the same as she had the night before, only more sharpened. She washed her face, brushed her hair back, and dressed in a simple navy outfit that read competent without drawing attention. No jewelry, no perfume. Clean lines, neutral choices. She tied her hair back tight and checked her bag again, not rummaging, only confirming placement by touch. 2 small drives separated. Folder sealed. Phone charged. Keys ready. When she stepped into the morning heat, the sky over San Antonio was already bright, the air carrying the faint smell of asphalt and exhaust. The hospital rose ahead like a glass monument, polished from the outside, quiet and cold from the inside. She parked in the staff lot and walked in through a side entrance, not the main doors. The badge on her lanyard remained Alyssa Rain, R.N. The lobby fountain murmured. The donor wall gleamed. Her father's portrait hung above reception, the same half-smile captured in a way that made the grief hit hard and quiet. She did not stop. She did not look up long enough to invite memory to cut her open. She moved toward the administrative wing. The hallway outside the executive conference room was empty at first. The doors were closed. The bench sat exactly where she remembered it, bolted to the wall metal and vinyl, meant for short waits and long discomfort. She sat down and placed her bag beside her close enough that her knee touched it. She kept her posture upright, not rigid, and let her face settle into something calm enough to be ignored. The building woke around her. At 7:30, Ray Delgado walked past the end of the corridor. He slowed when he saw her, his steps hesitating like his body wanted to stop and his mind refused. His eyes met hers. Guilt flickered across his face. "Morning," he said, voice low. "Morning," Alyssa replied. Ray's gaze darted to the conference room doors, then to the camera mounted in the corner. He did not come closer. He did not ask why she was there. He kept walking like a man carrying a family on his shoulders and fear in his throat. At 8, Carla Mendez appeared, heels clicking sharp against tile blazer over Scrub's clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She stopped when she saw Alyssa on the bench. Carla frowned. "You're not scheduled." Alyssa looked up. "Board session." Carla's eyes narrowed. "You?" "Yes, ma'am." Carla's mouth tightened, disdain slipping through. "Do not embarrass the unit." Alyssa kept her voice even. "I'm here to provide staff perspective." Carla's gaze flicked to Alyssa's bag as if it might contain contraband. "You better be careful what you say," she murmured. Alyssa held Carla's eyes. "I will be accurate." Carla scoffed softly and walked away, leaving a faint trail of perfume and authority. At 8:15, Dr. Priya Shah came striding down the hallway, white coat open, hair tied back tight, eyes focused as if she had been carrying a dozen emergencies at once. She passed Alyssa, then stopped and took 2 steps backward. "You're still here," Dr. Shah said, voice lower than normal. Alyssa nodded. "Yes." Dr. Shah's eyes flicked down the hall, scanning for anyone in earshot. "Be careful," she said. Alyssa did not ask why. Dr. Shah's face already carried the answer. Dr. Shah looked at Alyssa's bag, then at her face. "They watch," she added, a quiet admission that sounded like an apology. Alyssa nodded once. "I know." Dr. Shah held her gaze for a beat. Then her phone rang and she answered it, mid-stride voice snapping into clinical command. She disappeared around the corner. At 8:30, the conference room doors opened briefly and 2 administrators walked out carrying coffee. They laughed softly at something on a phone screen. They did not glance at Alyssa. To them, she was furniture. At 8:45, the elevator chimed, and a cluster of executives stepped out, suits, tablets, leather folios. They walked toward the conference room without breaking pace, eyes forward, conversations about budgets and optics. They entered and the heavy doors closed behind them. The smell of coffee drifted out and then faded. Alyssa sat alone in the corridor waiting while the building moved around her. Nurses passed pushing carts. Residents hurried by with charts pressed to their chests. A maintenance worker wheeled a mop bucket, eyes down. No one stopped. No one asked if she was in the right place. No one offered water. Her phone stayed face down. Her expression stayed calm. At 8:55, the elevator chimed again, and Grant Halstead stepped out. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been tailored for intimidation. His hair was perfect. His cufflinks caught the light. He walked toward her with the same smile he wore in staff meetings, the one that meant control. Grant stopped in front of her and glanced at her badge as if he already knew what it would say. "Alyssa Rain," he read aloud. "Prepared remarks." "Yes, sir," Alyssa replied. Grant checked his watch, slow and deliberate, and smiled as if they shared a private joke. "Meeting starts at 9, he said. "We'll call you when we're ready. Just wait here." He gestured toward the bench, a small motion with an enormous implication. Then he turned and walked into the conference room. The doors closed behind him. Alyssa sat back down. The clock on the wall clicked forward. Minutes stretched. The hallway filled and emptied. Conversations happened around her as if she were invisible. A nurse walked past with a cup of water and did not offer it. An administrator stepped out of the conference room, glanced at Alyssa like she was a nuisance, and walked away. Alyssa rested her hands on her lap and kept her shoulders steady. She did not close her eyes. She watched the camera in the corner, the small red light that suggested memory. At exactly 9, the elevator chimed. 3 figures stepped out, and the atmosphere in the corridor shifted as if someone had opened a door to cold air. Eleanor Briggs led navy suit-sharp posture, straight eyes alert. Caleb Winslow followed briefcase in hand, expression controlled. Dr. Nolan Mercer stepped out last, jaw-tight gaze already scanning the hallway. They stopped when they saw Alyssa on the bench. Eleanor's face changed first. Concern flashed, then anger contained so tightly it looked like calm. She crossed the corridor quickly, heels clicking in a precise rhythm. Alyssa stood as Eleanor approached. Eleanor stopped close enough that Alyssa could see the strain around her eyes. Eleanor's voice carried through the hallway, clear and deliberate. "Ma'am," she said, "I am sorry." The word hung in the air and drew attention like a flare. Caleb and Dr. Mercer stepped in beside Eleanor. "Good morning, ma'am," Caleb said. Dr. Mercer's voice was softer, but no less certain. "Morning, ma'am." Silence spread outward. A nurse stopped mid-step. A resident froze with a chart in hand. Ray Delgado turned his head sharply from the security desk down the hall, eyes widening as he tried to understand what he was hearing. Alyssa met Eleanor's gaze and nodded once. "Eleanor," Alyssa said, calm. "Caleb, Nolan." Dr. Mercer's eyes held hers a fraction longer than the others', recognition flickering there, something old and complicated. He said nothing, only gave the smallest nod. The conference room doors opened. Grant Halstead stepped out. Irritation on his face, already preparing to speak. His expression shifted the moment he saw the 3 board members standing in the corridor, not entering the room, not smiling. Then he saw who they were facing. Grant's smile faltered. His eyes moved from Eleanor to Caleb to Dr. Mercer, then to Alyssa, then back again. He was trying to assemble a picture that did not match his assumptions. Alyssa watched the color drain from his face. Grant's jaw tightened. "Is there a problem?" he asked, voice clipped. Eleanor turned her head slightly, eyes still on Alyssa. "There is," she said. Her tone did not rise. It did not need to. More staff began to gather, drawn by the shift in energy. A few nurses leaned out of doorways. A pharmacy tech appeared at the end of the hall and stopped. Denise Parker stood near a corner, half hidden, eyes fixed on Alyssa with the tension of someone holding her breath. Alyssa stepped forward, not toward Grant, but toward the space where people could see her clearly. She did not raise her voice. The corridor's silence did the work for her. "My name is Alyssa Reed," she said. A ripple moved through the crowd. A few brows lifted. A few mouths opened slightly and then closed again. Alyssa's gaze swept across the faces, then returned to Grant. "Dr. Thomas Reed was my father," she continued. "He built Lone Star Meridian." Denise's hand rose to her mouth. Ray Delgado's shoulders went stiff. Dr. Shaw appeared at the edge of the crowd, coffee in hand, and stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing as she looked between Alyssa and the board. Grant's face tightened with anger, the kind that arrived when fear was denied. "This is inappropriate," he snapped. "We have a meeting." Caleb stepped forward, a half-step, voice steady. "We do," he said, "and it will proceed with the full board present." Eleanor's eyes remained hard. Inside and outside the room, she added. Grant's gaze flicked to the gathering staff and his lips curled slightly. "This is a stunt," he said. Alyssa did not react to the insult. She opened her bag and removed a single folder, holding it with both hands, not waving it, not presenting it like theater. She looked at Grant as if he were a patient who had lied about symptoms. "I worked here as Alyssa Rain," she said. "Night shift, traveler. I came to see what the complaint letters described. I saw patients waiting in hallways. I saw medication orders delayed by locked access. I saw supply shelves emptied while purchase orders claimed the opposite. I saw staff threatened for speaking about safety." Grant took a step forward, his voice rising. "You are a nurse. You do not understand the financial structure of this institution." Alyssa's voice stayed calm. "Then you will be relieved to know the documents do." Caleb set his briefcase down on a small table against the wall and opened it. He removed a tablet and connected it to the wall-mounted screen that normally displayed hospital announcements. The screen flickered, then shifted to a clean white background. Eleanor glanced once at Alyssa. Alyssa nodded. Caleb's fingers moved with practiced speed. A document appeared on the screen, not flashy, not dramatic, just a corporate filing displayed in clear text. Patriot Meridian Supply, registered owner Darren Halstead. Grant's eyes narrowed. "That is irrelevant." Caleb turned slightly, looking at Grant with legal patience. "Darren Halstead is your brother-in-law," he said. "Correct." Grant's mouth tightened. "I do not discuss family in a public corridor." Eleanor's voice cut through, controlled and sharp. "You discussed family when you routed hospital purchasing through it." The crowd shifted. A nurse whispered something. Someone else said, "That's his family." The words moved like static through the group. Alyssa spoke again, steady. "Over the last 18 months, this hospital spent millions on supplies through Patriot Meridian. Pricing is consistently above market. Purchase volume is high enough to keep the hospital fully stocked." She paused and looked toward the nurses, the techs, the staff who knew the shelves. "And yet Alyssa said you have been working with empty rooms." Denise's eyes filled with tears that did not fall. Dr. Shaw's jaw tightened. Caleb tapped the screen. A spreadsheet appeared, columns and totals, clean, dated, methodical. Then a second spreadsheet. Then inventory values. Alyssa continued, voice level. "Inventory on hand does not match purchases. Delivery confirmations exist without corresponding stock. Receiving logs show repeated sign-offs, missing stamps, inconsistent verification." Grant laughed once, sharp and false. "This is accounting noise. Supply chain disruptions. Labor shortages." Alyssa looked at him. "A locked med room is not supply chain. A missing sterile kit during a rapid response is not labor shortage." Dr. Shaw's eyes flicked to Alyssa and held. Alyssa shifted the folder in her hands and opened it to a tabbed section, then looked toward the pharmacy tech at the edge of the crowd. The tech's face was pale, eyes wide. Alyssa did not call her out by name. She spoke to the corridor as a whole. "Controlled medications have been ordered and documented," Alyssa said. "High-value pain management and oncology drugs. Staff have been told they are unavailable while records show receipt." Grant's voice rose. "That is a serious accusation." Alyssa nodded slightly. "It is." Caleb changed the screen again. A list of pharmacy override approvals appeared, each line stamped with date and time. The authorizing name repeated. Grant Halstead. A low sound moved through the crowd. Not words, more like the intake of breath that comes when people see the shape of something they have been afraid to name. Grant's face reddened. "Override access exists for leadership oversight," he said. "I sign off on disposals. expired medications, damaged shipments. Alyssa's voice stayed soft but precise. Then the disposal quantities should align with usage and expiry. They do not. Caleb held up a single page, not waving it, simply showing it. "We have the discrepancy analysis verified," he said. Grant looked around, searching for an ally, for someone to break the moment, to call it inappropriate to end it. The staff did not move. The board did not move. Eleanor's voice dropped lower, more dangerous because it was controlled. "We also have reports of retaliation," she said. Write-ups clustered around staff who raised safety concerns. Terminations justified by paperwork generated in a matter of days. Grant's eyes narrowed at Eleanor. "You are overstepping." Eleanor did not blink. "You are confusing your office with ownership." Alyssa shifted her stance and held the folder tighter. She did not allow triumph into her face. She kept it clinical, the way she kept her hand steady when a wound was ugly. "And last night," Alyssa said after a double shift, "I sat on this bench in the administrative hallway." Grant's eyes flicked toward the bench. His throat moved once. Alyssa continued, voice still calm. "At 2:47 in the morning, you approached me while you believed I was asleep. You removed my personal folder from my bag. You photographed documents." Grant shook his head once, a reflexive denial. "That is a lie." Caleb's fingers moved on the tablet. The screen changed. Security footage filled the display crisp enough to remove doubt. The timestamp in the corner read 02:47. The camera angle showed the bench clearly. Grant Halstead walked into frame, paused, scanned the corridor, leaned down, and slid the folder from the bag. He flipped pages. He raised his phone. He photographed. The sound that escaped the gathered staff was immediate and involuntary. Grant stood frozen, watching himself on the screen. Alyssa's voice remained steady. "You used the image of a tired nurse in a hallway to build a story you could sell. You wanted to discredit me before I spoke." Grant's face tightened with fury. "You set me up," he spat. Alyssa met his gaze without flinching. "You chose your own actions." Eleanor stepped forward, and when she spoke, her tone did not ask for permission. "Grant Halstead," she said as board chair. "I am suspending you, effective immediately." Grant's eyes snapped to her. "You cannot do this in a hallway." Caleb's voice was calm. "We can do it anywhere when the evidence supports it." Eleanor continued. "Your access to the building systems is revoked. Your access to pharmacy overrides is revoked. Your access to vendor authorization is revoked." Grant's breath came faster. "This is a coup," he snapped. Eleanor looked at him as if he were something she had already decided to remove. "It is a correction." Two uniformed officers appeared at the far end of the corridor, moving with a controlled pace that suggested they had been waiting nearby. They were joined by a hospital security supervisor Alyssa had never seen before. Posture-squared eyes focused on Grant. Grant's gaze flicked toward the officers and then back to Eleanor. "You called police," he said, voice strained. Caleb spoke quietly. Evidence was preserved. The board authorized the handoff. Grant's mouth opened and closed once. His hands flexed at his sides. He turned toward Alyssa as if she were the problem he could still intimidate. "You think you're untouchable," he said, voice low, venomous. Alyssa looked at him with the same calm she used when a patient was combative from fear. "I think you are accountable," she replied. The officers approached. Mr. Halstead, one said, professional neutral. "We need you to come with us." Grant's eyes flashed. "On what grounds?" The officer held his gaze. "Fraud investigation. Controlled substance diversion inquiry. We will discuss it outside." Grant's face went pale. He looked around again, searching for a way to turn this back into theater, but the corridor was full of witnesses. Denise stood rigid, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Ray Delgado's hands were clenched at his sides. Dr. Shaw's expression was hard, unblinking. Grant's shoulders tightened. "This hospital will fall apart without me," he said, voice louder. No one answered. The officers stepped closer. Grant's posture faltered. For the first time, he looked like a man without a podium. He moved, as if to step back toward the conference room doors. The security supervisor shifted into his path. Grant stopped, then turned and walked the only available direction past the staff who had learned to keep their heads down for too long. The handcuffs clicked with a sound that seemed too loud in a hospital hallway. A nurse exhaled sharply. Someone whispered finally, and then covered their mouth as if even hope could be punished. Alyssa did not move until Grant was escorted away. She watched him go with a face that did not gloat. There was no satisfaction in it, only a controlled stillness, the kind that came after a dangerous procedure when the bleeding was stopped, but the body still shook from adrenaline. When the corridor began to breathe again, Eleanor turned to Alyssa. "Ma'am," Eleanor said again, quieter this time, the word heavy with regret. "I should have known they would do that to you. Sitting you out here." Alyssa shook her head once. "You needed to see it," she said, "not just the numbers, the culture." Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "You saw enough." Alyssa glanced at the staff. Denise, Ray, Dr. Shaw, nurses in scrubs and techs in badges and residents with tired eyes. People who had been holding their breath. Alyssa addressed them, voice steady. "If you have reports, if you have documentation, if you have concerns that you buried because you were afraid Caleb Winslow will receive them through the board's attorney channel." She did not say safe. She did not promise protection. She simply opened a door and let truth become possible. Caleb nodded once, expression controlled, but his eyes carried intent. The crowd began to thin as people were called back to patients, to medications, to tasks that did not pause for board drama. Hospitals always returned to need. Alyssa watched them go and felt the weight of that reality. A CEO being removed did not refill a supply shelf by itself. It did not unring the call bell that went unanswered. It did not erase the fear that had been conditioned into reflex. Alyssa turned toward the conference room doors. Eleanor placed a hand on her arm. "Not in there," she said, voice low. "Not yet." Alyssa nodded. Her throat tightened suddenly, not from fear now, but from exhaustion and the quiet grief that had been fueling her for weeks. She stepped back to the bench, sat for a moment, and finally allowed herself one deep breath. The next hours moved in tight, controlled sequences. Caleb and Eleanor disappeared into closed-door conversations. Dr. Mercer moved quickly between departments, speaking with physician leads. Hospital security stood at the administrative wing doors, posture changed, faces alert. Alyssa did not hover near the center of it. She walked the unit corridors instead. In the med-surg hall, she passed a patient room where the call light blinked. She entered and found the same elderly woman from her first week, the one who had said she felt like she was disappearing. The woman's eyes widened when she saw Alyssa in professional clothes. "You're not a traveler," the woman whispered. Alyssa sat beside her, voice gentle. "I'm still a nurse," she said. The woman swallowed hard. "Does that mean it's going to change?" Alyssa looked at her dressing, checked the chart, and adjusted the blanket with careful hands. "It means you will be seen," she said. In the supply room down the hall, a materials manager arrived with a clipboard and a red-faced urgency. A cart rolled in behind him with sealed boxes. Sterile packs, IV kits, dressings. Denise stood at the doorway, watching, disbelief on her face. Alyssa did not claim victory. She only watched the shelves fill and felt a quiet anger at how quickly it could have been fixed if anyone had wanted it fixed. Ray Delgado caught her near the security desk later that afternoon. He looked like a man who had not slept in days. "I'm sorry," Ray said, voice rough. Alyssa shook her head. "You survived," she replied. "That matters." Ray swallowed, eyes wet. "I saw him loading boxes," he said, more than once. Alyssa held his gaze. "If you can write down dates and times, do it," she said softly. "Only what you know." Ray nodded, quickly, relief and fear tangled together. "I can," he said. Days passed, then weeks, and the hospital shifted in small, tangible ways. Doors that had been locked were no longer locked without reason. Medication access returned to clinical control. Supply orders began to match shelves. Nurses stopped flinching when leadership walked by because leadership started walking by in scrubs and listening instead of inspecting. Alyssa met with Eleanor and Caleb in a quiet office one morning after a night shift. Eleanor's face looked tired but different now, less tense. "We appointed an interim administrator," Eleanor said. "Operational authority, compliance oversight, transparent procurement." Alyssa nodded. Caleb studied her. "The investigation continues," he said, voice careful. Alyssa did not ask for details. She had seen enough to know that systems did not unwind in a day. Eleanor watched Alyssa's face. "You could take the executive role," she said. "You are the owner." Alyssa's hands rested on the table. Her fingers were bandaged at one knuckle from catching her hand on a sharp drawer edge during a night shift. The small injury felt more honest than any title. "I'm not staying in the office," Alyssa said. Eleanor's brows lifted slightly. "You walked into a corrupt system alone and dismantled it. You have the spine for it." Alyssa's gaze held steady. "I have the stomach for patient care," she replied. "That is different." Caleb's eyes narrowed with thought. "You want oversight without the daily seat." Alyssa nodded. "I will be present. I will attend board sessions. I will audit. I will ask the questions people were punished for asking. But I will not trade bedside truth for boardroom distance." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Thomas would recognize that she said. Alyssa did not answer. The mention of her father still hit like pressure on a bruise. That night, Alyssa walked into the unit in scrubs again, badge clipped to her collar, the name, reading Alyssa Reed, now no cover, no disguise. The nurse's station quieted for a moment as people looked up. Denise stood near the charting computers, hands still, eyes cautious. She looked at Alyssa for a beat, then gave a small nod, something between respect and relief. Dr. Shaw passed with a chart tucked under her arm and stopped briefly. "You kept your nerve," Dr. Shaw said. Alyssa's expression remained calm. "So did you," she replied. Dr. Shaw's mouth tightened in the closest thing to a smile she offered. "Don't waste the momentum," she said, then walked away. Alyssa went into a patient room where an older man lay staring at the ceiling, the monitor beside him beeping steady. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Alyssa pulled a chair close and spoke softly. "I'm Alyssa," she said. "I'm your nurse tonight." The man turned his head slightly. His eyes moved over her badge, then back to her face. "You're the one," he said quietly. "The one from the hallway." Alyssa kept her voice gentle. "I'm the one who's here," she replied. He swallowed, throat-working. "My wife waited for hours last week," he said. "She said she felt invisible." Alyssa nodded. "I heard she said, tell me what she needed." The man's shoulders loosened slightly. His eyes softened with the first trace of trust. Alyssa listened, then stood and checked his IV, adjusted his pillow, and wrote a note on the chart with clean, careful handwriting. The work was ordinary. The ordinary was the point. Later, as she walked down the corridor, the camera in the corner blinked its small red light. It was still there. It had watched the bench. It had watched the theft. It had watched the truth move into daylight. Alyssa did not look up at it. She kept walking the hospital sounds around her, the steady hum beneath everything, and for the first time since her father died, the building felt less like a monument, and more like what he had wanted it to be, a place where people did not have to disappear to be cared for.